Thank you, Amanda. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, you do.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and look for a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting we had. I'd like to bring that motion forward.
I'll make that motion, Peter.
And I'm sorry, Supervisor McDevitt as the second, Supervisor Hogan is the first. All in favor? Or any discussion? Let's put it this way. Any discussion on that? If not, we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. So just a brief housekeeping. I'd like to go through the agenda. We're going to ask Ryan before he has to drop off a little discussion about our opening and what he thinks the governor's going to do. Dr. Duffy, I see, is on, and Ed Bartholomew next. Then over to Liza with a discussion on workforce, and then Wayne on some of the planning issues in front of us. So Ryan, I know we're in a hurry. Everybody can put our seatbelts on. Let's see how fast we can get through this. So Ryan, I'll defer to you. Just a little comment about our opening.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually took care of one of those pressing calls just now before this started. So where we're at right now, we certified 48 contact tracers last night, Warren County. We certified 48 contact tracers. That's 30% of what this region needed certified yesterday. We've got 6% of the population. I know that the other 7 counties were working just as, maybe not just as, but close to as hard as we were working on it. I can't imagine why we won't have an announcement coming from the governor today that we're in phase 1. I wouldn't understand it if that was not the announcement. I'm not even sure when he's speaking today. But that's where we're at. And we're working with businesses that see, one problem we're having right now is phase 4 recreation is a massive category that affects a lot of businesses up here. If you are not enumerated in the pause listing on the ESD website as being an essential business, and if you cannot put your information into that tool that I sent along yesterday to all the supervisors, if you cannot put your information into that tool and have the state say that you're allowed to operate, you're not allowed to operate. The essential business ESD piece, people have been confused because this piece opened up outdoor low-risk recreational activities being permitted so long as social distancing and cleaning and disinfection measures are in place. But then they name it. They name tennis, non-motorized boat use such as rentals, rowboats, kayaks, canoes. Excuse me. Let me read it correctly. Non-motorized boat use and rentals such as rowboats, kayaks, canoes, and golf and driving ranges except mini golf with food and retail services subject to restrictions that are currently in effect within the region. Drive-in movie theaters are allowed under social distancing and cleaning and disinfection measures. Marinas, boatyards, and recreational marine manufacturers for ongoing marina operations and boat repair maintenance, where such facilities adhere to strict social distancing and sanitation. Use of such sites for the purposes of personal use or operation of boats or other watercraft is permissible, provided that no establishment offer chartered watercraft services or rentals. Restaurant activity at such sites are limited to takeout or delivery only. If your low-risk recreational activity is not included in that verbiage, and you put in your NAICS code on the site and it says that it doesn't spit something out that says you're open, then you're not open. You're still part of phase 4 recreation, and that's something that we're parsing out every single day. I've had feedback from the camping industry, from restaurants for operating on patios. I've had feedback from marinas, really, really good stuff. And that feedback is going to the state policymakers that are writing these policies. And every day in the control room, we're hammering on this because this is creating a lot of stress up here, a lot of difficult political positions, frankly, for elected officials, and we need it resolved. But we're not going to. You can't just say, oh, that sounds good to me, go ahead and do it, because all it takes is for one misstep, and that's a news story, and this region gets a black eye, and our brand gets a black eye. we can't afford to be associated with a misstep or something illegal or something dangerous, because people need to feel safe if they're going to come here this summer. That's my update.
Sorry, still having problems with the technology today. Thanks, Ryan. And he's right. We need to be consistent in terms of how the rules are applied. It's really done by the state, not us locally from a county level, not from the town level. So I think we need to just get that word out and continue to focus on being safe. Dr. Duffy, any update for us today?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for a few minutes. First, we are having our virtual commencement ceremony on June 6th, and thank you to Supervisor Wild, who came in, I think, last week and did a quick broadcast of his speech and congratulating one of our Warren County extraordinary students. So thank you for participating. And the fun thing is that we have almost exactly the same number of students who've signed up to participate in the virtual ceremony as we did in our in-person ceremony. So we're glad to see so many students and families participating, albeit a little bit different than we're used to. The SUNY system had received an anonymous donation to support emergency care funds for students. And so there's a one-to-one match opportunity that if we we can raise up to $50,000 and get another $50,000 through the SUNY Impact Foundation, which would allow us to have a pretty substantial fund to help our students most in need. And so we're actively engaging in a fundraising campaign called Rally for 80K. And so far we've raised 25,000 of that 50. So we're very excited to be able to build up a fund for anticipating future student needs. Summer classes started yesterday and they're moving along, and will continue to operate in a remote fashion for our summer classes. Fall registration is also going on, and we've actually had a pretty substantial number of students register for fall. We haven't made our final decisions about how specific classes will be delivered for fall. Just like every other college and university in the country, we're weighing all of our options to ensure the health and safety of our students and our employees. We have several groups that are working on that, not only on campus, but of course within the state. And so we're trying to take the best guidance from everyone to make the best decision we possibly can. However, we want to make that decision relatively soon so that our faculty and our staff and our students have time to prepare for the fall. So my hope is to have a more definitive answer to our campus community by early June, if not sooner. One barrier that we continue to see that I know this body is very in tune with, which is the digital divide. We still have many students and families that have limited or no access to any sort of digital tool. And so we're continue to be concerned about how any delivery in a remote way would eliminate certain students from their either beginning their education or continuing their education. So we will continue to make sure those that can control that can do something more to help our families in Warren and Washington County to be able to access broadband and in any way to help students continue their education. Of course, that will have an impact on K through 12 as well, based on whatever mode of instruction they are able to enter into the fall. And thank you to Warren County. You guys have been just tremendous partners, and I appreciate being part of the Economic Recovery Task Force. And we also will have employees participating in the contact tracing training this week so that we have several of our employees trained, which will be part of our reopening strategy to ensure that we can accommodate any sort of health needs, at least as best we can. But we appreciate having a partnership with the county to help us do that. And of course, we would then lend our services to the county should they find in need of that support. And then finally, of course, budget season is upon us. And as we continue to wait for any sort of decision from the Division of Budget about potential reductions in state aid, both in this year's budget as well as next year's, we're trying to put a budget together just as you are anticipating that there will be a reduction in aid and how we'll be able to accommodate that. And again, we've been working very closely with Mr. Moore and helping to determine what the county might be able to do to support our needs, as well as Washington County. So we're working through that now. We meet with our board next week to present our first draft of a budget that may have to be altered once we learn more from the state in terms of their reduction. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from the committee for Dr. Duffy? Supervisor Sieber.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. Duffy. I know these are challenging times, and I also recognize that we're on a tight schedule this morning. I just wondered if we could have emailed to us, and perhaps this is a question for Chairman Wild, just the students that Warren County will be recognizing, maybe a little history about them, or, you know, their name and information, and, you know, would love to still be able to recognize them virtually if in fact it looks like it's going to be a while before we're all back in person. But what an accomplishment to all those students in Warren County. And I know our chairman of the board typically sends out a letter congratulating them. So we really want to extend that congratulations and that hard work.
Supervisor, I'm sorry, that's on me. There are two students that I was able to recognize. They were offered by Dr. Duffy and her team, and I will get out a little bit about their bios to you later today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions from the committee for Dr. Duffy? In general, any questions for Dr. Duffy? Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you so much. No, it wasn't for Dr. Duffy. I appreciate her being here, and I know she's going through, the whole college is going through a tough time. So I don't have any questions for her at this time, because I think there's still so much up in the air about the governor's budget and how that's going to impact SUNY Adirondacks budget. I did have a question for Mr. Moore. He mentioned about the business tool to identify whether or not you are able to reopen, and he sent that to us in an email just now. So I'm hoping that we can get our business community who's out there on the line now to help us spread the word about using that tool to make sure that so that the businesses can make sure they are eligible to reopen, assuming we get that green light today.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Duffy? With that, Chris, thank you. You can, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. Be well. Yep.
Thanks. Bye now. Ed Bartholomew. Ed, is there anything you'd like to add today? I'm sorry, Ed, you're on mute. There
Yep,
we go.
I'm on mute. And,
You're good.
okay, we're unmuted there by the host. Can you see me? No, I just.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, all I can see is the Zoom right now, but that's okay. One of the things that is occurring is the anticipation of the opening, and we are very supportive, and we thank Ryan for the leadership and our entire board of supervisors for really making the point that the North Country, Warren County, is in need of this. It still remains that we need to have that message coincide with a message of public health, safety, social distancing are very important. We continue to see around the country where there has been this eager reopening to restaurants and bars where they are coming down immediately within a few days of the virus. So as Ryan accurately portrayed very concisely, we don't want to be the poster of an area that has exploded again. So I think that message needs to be there, not only by the board and Don Lehman's emails and Ryan's on a regular basis, but also by the businesses in their reopening statements and so forth. So one of the encouraging things is obviously with the start of construction, we've received a number of calls that smaller projects and larger projects are beginning to prepare for the reopening. It may not be, you'll see tractor trailers bringing equipment and construction materials in in the next day or two, but they are getting prepared and ready to open up, including, as an example, in downtown Glens Falls, the Farmers Market Center will be undertaking some construction, some projects in Queensbury. Very shortly are gearing up to do some renovations and restorations in a couple of businesses that are acquiring buildings and bringing in some new businesses into Queensbury as well. And as I indicated at the LDC meeting, one of the manufacturing businesses currently in the Queensbury area is looking to increase their production of their protective gear and will be coming before the LDC next Friday, which is an encouraging sign and a sign of confidence in their production, but as well as confidence in our area to have the adequate workers to help in that area. I do want to mention, in furtherance of that, working in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, we are planning to have a Zoom conference webinar, if you will, for small businesses throughout Warren County in sometime in June, early June, which will be recorded. We'll also have some representatives from SBA and so forth. We will record that, obviously, and have that posted on various websites, as well as having a text available of information and so forth, so it can be a full, elaborate presentation, not only from a visual point, but have the text and the material, the documents to back up in this particular area as well. And just indicating, and I'll defer to your last item, I believe, is on the broadband, that EDC undertook on behalf of the Gateway Council, which did a broadband study in the mid-2015 area that included Warren, Washington, and northern Saratoga County. And so the chairman and Wayne had asked EDC, we are in the process of getting a updated cost to do a gap analysis, if you will, of the areas that have been improved, albeit may be small in some areas, since 2015 in the broadband 1 and 2 by the governor, as well as also the deficiencies that remain in cell coverage. And we hope to have that quote back to share with Wayne in planning and to Chairman Thomas, as well as indicating that EDC will be pledging funding toward that study. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed from the committee? Ed, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate that and all the work you're doing. I'm just going to add just one comment as a follow-up to Ed. It's we're opening in phase 1. Ryan mentioned this. There's only a certain subset of businesses that are allowed to open. Sometimes I get to the point where I feel is we need to have a program that says if you see something, say something. If people are in violation of what's happening, it could put the next phase opening at risk. And the whole idea is to get the whole business community back to work and do it safely. So we need to all kind of pitch in. There is a hotline. I believe it's on the Empire State Development website. Not to say that we want to be blatantly just turning people in and making things difficult for us to be open, but it's important that we all pitch in together. So that's all I have to add with that. So again, Ed, thank you again. Any other questions, Ed, or maybe I should reach out to Don. Were there any questions for Ed? I'm not sure if he's going to stick around on our remote viewers.
Yes, sir.
No, Chairman. No, there's been no questions at this point, Chairman Weil.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving forward, Liza, can we talk about workforce? And I don't believe that there were anything for the committee to take action on. So this is just a discussion, if I'm not correct.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. I have many updates, but I will try to be brief as I know where everybody's behind schedule. I did want to share summer youth employment program updates. We have been still waiting for guidance and financial numbers from the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance. We are hopeful that that information is coming this week, but the idea is that we will still be able to offer some virtual programs to youth. However, if they also give any other guidelines that allow us to do any outside work sites later in the summer, I would love to do a combination of virtual learning about job readiness programs, job shadowing, virtual projects in combination with some outside work sites around food, for example, Operation Food Chain, helping to get food to children and families, hopefully mid-July, late August, if all guidelines allow us to do so. That would allow us to still offer something to youth who do not have consistent internet access. So we'd be able to offer virtual and in-person work sites with, of course, safety precautions and supervision. So that's my goal, but we have to wait on the approval and the funding from OTDA. And I'm open to feedback, questions, and suggestions as well for summer youth employment. Other updates since the last time we met, our UI calls to the mainline, unemployment insurance calls to the mainline have decreased. So in March and April, they were more like 40, 50 calls a day, and now we're down to about 10 calls a day to the main line. So there could be a number of reasons for that. Our March unemployment numbers for our region were only slightly higher than they were in 2019. We are waiting for April numbers to come out. Some of those preliminary numbers will come out this Thursday and more data next week. So I'm happy to share that information once we have it. I'm really anxious to see the April unemployment numbers for our region. We are working on trying to address childcare concerns for employees who need to return to work. So I did send out the Southern Adirondack Childcare Network information. That scholarship has just been renewed and extended through the end of the month. And I'm hopeful that they'll keep extending it as long as we're transitioning folks back to work. And I'm also this week working on some guidance for businesses for how to have productive conversations with their employees about returning to work. We really want employees to feel safe and comfortable, but also feel heard, so that they are buying into returning as well and are able to, with all the supports that our community has put in place and will continue to put in place. And also starting a back to work campaign. So I'm going to be speaking with Chambers of Commerce this week, as well as Don Lehman about helping me get out that messaging. Our Workforce Development Board is going through some growing pains. 6 Workforce Development Board members have resigned. For Warren County, that's 2 Workforce Development Board members, 1 in February and 1 recently. And then we have 3 reinstatements to do. So you will be seeing that information very soon. And our goal, of course, is to make sure all entities, SUNY, BOCES, EDC, Chambers, and the Workforce Development Board are all working cohesively and collaboratively, as that will be very important for our economic recovery. And the unemployment fraud flyer, I appreciate Don Lehman pushing out on social media. As of this morning, it had 76 shares. So our community is helping to get the word out about unemployment fraud, and I'm grateful for that. I think those are the main things I wanted to share with you today, but I am very happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions.
Thank you, Liza. Any questions from the committee?
I do.
Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Chairman Wild. Am I okay or am I echoing?
You're good.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Liza, for your report and the information that you've been sharing with us over time. It's really, really appreciated and helpful as we're going through this difficult time. Do you know, are people still waiting for unemployment payments to be coming, or is that getting sorted out for our people locally?
Yeah.
I know it's been
Thank you for that question. Very important. It's getting better. So our local Department of Labor employees have been pulled for mandatory overtime to assist with processing unemployment. So it's getting better. Some people, I've also had people report back to me when they finally get it, because I like hearing that good news, or I like getting the updates. So when local residents reach out, they are making progress. And we see that in the number of calls that are reducing, but also the fact that DOL decreased the number of questions that for them to answer. And it's pretty much online. So hopefully in the next few weeks, they'll be caught up now that they're all doing mandatory overtime. In addition, my staff are also still making calls, and most people are still reporting that they intend to return to their previous employer. And I have not received many WARN notices. So I'm still very optimistic and hopeful about that for our region.
That's great. I wanted to ask about that too. I know you said that Don Lehman was just pushing out the fraud flyer, which you and I had a little dialogue about that. I'm just hoping that people will, like you said, have a good dialogue with their employers and feel comfortable and safe being able to go back to work, and knowing that if they don't, they could be facing a problem. What are they facing? I don't know. They're going to lose their payments at the very least.
Yeah,
So,
and it is case to case. It is case by case. So there will be some people who are still eligible for unemployment insurance due to their own personal circumstances. We understand that not everybody is able to return to work, but those who are able to, our community needs them to right now. So that's really the message we're trying to get out. And I think the conversations between employer and employee are critical because it has to be guided with compassion and understanding, and also employee buy-in. Employees may have suggestions and ideas that their employer didn't even think about. They're really valuable assets to our businesses, and I want to make sure that working with the chambers that we're able to get some guidance and help out there about that.
thanks. Yeah, just one more thing, Supervisor Wild, if you'll let me. I know that you mentioned about the Childcare Scholarship getting extended, which is great. But one of the things that I think maybe our employers could be thinking about is trying to be a little bit flexible there, because the childcare scholarships aren't going to cover everyone, and not every parent may feel comfortable sending their kid back to the regular childcare. So some sort of flexible work arrangement, or maybe even childcare options on site where it's just your kid and other kids of people, your own coworkers. I don't know, something to think about and put in employers' minds.
Yeah,
Right,
thank you for that. We are going to have to be creative with addressing that concern. The other challenge for employers is that many of them who got PPP loans, in order to have them forgiven, they need their employees to come back full time, is what I'm hearing, and they're having a challenge working around the childcare issues to get that, to balance that out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you, Liza. And just for the committee, Liza, she has been part of the Economic Recovery Task Force since the beginning. She's been all over unemployment. She's been all over childcare. And she was also one of the first to jump in when we discovered the issues with the incentive from the CARE Act that gives everyone on unemployment an extra $600 a week. And it makes it very difficult to attract them back to go to work when we have an opportunity for these individuals to get back to work. There's no real incentive. So she's been very helpful with that. And let me open it up to any other questions from anyone else or comments regarding workforce unemployment. Thank you, Liza.
If I could just add, it's going to be really important that we continue to let our representatives know that if they extend the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, the additional $600, if they extend that beyond July 31st, that is going to be extremely detrimental to us, in my opinion. And so there really, I think there was some conversation in some of the bills, proposed bills, that there's an incentive for returning to work, right? The exact opposite. So in conversations with legislators, I really just want to make sure that we get that out there, that the additional 600, it's fine if people still qualify for state unemployment assistance. That's I understand, that's always going to be there. But the additional 600 from the feds, if that extends beyond July 31st, it's really going to be hard for us to get a workforce.
Thank you, Liza. You're right. And there have been discussions with some of our legislators about the fact that people, when they are called back to work, they need to come or they may lose their unemployment benefits. So it's in process. We're working it, and we just have to kind of keep going with that. Up next, I have,
just
sorry?
quick on the workforce. Do we know if our J1 employees are able to come? What, I haven't heard anything about that.
I've heard nothing.
Do we have anybody on here from Lake George Chamber?
I don't know.
Okay. The last I spoke with Gina, she said that one of her businesses was still expecting a few J1 workers, but not until June, and then they would have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So that creates other challenges. I don't see how, with all of the travel restrictions from other countries and our country, that we're going to be able to have many J1 workers. And the needs will vary by business in terms of whether they're at 50% capacity or whatever the guidelines are. But I'm happy to help fill those gaps any way that I can. Especially for our younger workforce, we're going to have to make sure that parents know that there are a lot of great safety measures in place.
Thank you, Liza. So if it's all right with the privilege of the committee, I'd like to move on to planning in Wayne. Without objection. Wayne, there's a couple of resolutions you have in front of us. Can we start with the first one, resolution 4?
Sure. Just before we do that, I would like to ask that, point out to the committee in recognition, everything that Sarah's been doing with the COVID-19 website, with information and with data, I think she's done a phenomenal job, and I would be remiss if I did not, bring it to the committee and acknowledge her efforts that go above and beyond what we would normally expect. So, Sarah, thank you.
I agree.
All right. We have a committee has we have a resolution request to renew our agreement with AGFTC. We provide GIS services on an as needed basis, and the it's reimbursed to the county as a direct cost. So if we spend 5 hours of Sarah time on it, we'll bill them for those 5 hours at her current rate. In the past, this has had an expiration date on it. We're in discussion with the county attorney. We feel that if we just leave it open-ended with a 30-day clause in it that either side could back out of it with the 30 days notice, then we don't have to come every year for a resolution and a new agreement and whatever. So that's there for the committee's consideration.
Thank you, Wayne. So what I need is a motion to bring this to the table. Supervisor Hogan first, Supervisor Leggett second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? That is carried. Secondly, let's move on to that next resolution, the resolution 20. Wayne?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just want to make you aware, Supervisor Wild, that Supervisor McGowan, his phone and his internet it's completely down. He's not able to be on. So while he started as part of your quorum, he is not here.
Thank you. Amanda, if I may, do we still have a quorum without Supervisor McGowan?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Sieber. Sorry, Wayne, please go forward.
That's somewhat of a perfect segue into the next consideration. This really is an outgrowth of a number of discussions I've had with other supervisors, and this has been an ongoing issue for a number of years. And whether or not this resolution goes forward, I think there's a number of ideas that need to be considered. There's been some emails about this, and I can see both sides of the emails from the supervisors. So, it's a discussion item. I also believe that Jerry Delaney's on the line. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
I believe I saw him, but I'm not sure if he's still here.
There's somebody named Jerry there.
Jerry, you still online?
Yes, I am. Thank you
Okay.
for allowing me to listen in.
You're very welcome. So, Wayne?
So, with this resolution was drafted with input from AATV. Everybody's kind of freezing up on me here.
We can still hear you, Wayne. At least I can.
Okay. You kind of went just static for a second. This resolution came about and these advocacy points from discussions with Matt Simpson, Fred Monroe, emailed to Bill Farber, and I'm sure Jerry was part of all this conversation. So I think this is something that needs to be addressed. Dr. Duffy really also, talked about the digital divide. And to me, it came to be an issue. If, we want to have economic recovery, we need to start addressing some of these shortfalls with our, be digitally competitive with other regions. I was I had a takeout order the other night in Warrensburg and they didn't have internet and their phone swipes wouldn't work. So, businesses are trying to make do with this situation that we've got. And I think with all the kids being home, school being done online, personally at home, I know everything. If I try to do any kind of video at home, it's in constant buffering. So I think we're really taxing our existing infrastructure and we need to look at ways to improve that. I've got a map up here in the office of the cell towers in Warren County, and you get away from the village of Lake George and the Northway, and there's like one or two out in the rural areas that from Verizon and AT&T. So we need to look at maybe increasing the quality of those services due to the geographic constraints, and that's kind of where I was coming from on this. Now, I think it's a good opportunity for discussion. Maybe nothing gets done today. But at least we can start the discussion. So to that end, I know Jerry's on the line and I'd ask him to kind of add anything he cares to add relative to these points and where they came from. Jerry?
And Wayne, these are, and I'm sorry to interrupt, and Jerry, if you give me just a second, on the resolution request, there's, 4 or 5 bullets. Is that what you're asking Jerry to address, or are those from you, Wayne?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Without objection. Jerry, would you like to kind of go through these bullets if you can see them? I'm not sure if you have the resolution.
Can we have an introduction here?
Sure. Jerry, you with us? Can you
Okay, Jerry.
Great, thank you.
It could be the internet again. Is that Hey,
All
there we
right.
go.
I'm sorry, struggling with muting and unmuting. Yes, I am Jerry Delaney. I am the Executive Director of the Adirondack Park Local Government Review Board. And I know some of you supervisors are from outside the park. The review board was run as the Executive Director was Fred Monroe for a number of years. We were created in the Executive Law 803A. Governor Rockefeller said we were the watchdog agency. Our statutory obligation is to advise and assist the APA on land use matters, and we are local government's representative to the board. We have a voice on the board. We do not vote on the board. So this organization firmly believes that we are your voice. And this, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, because this is not just something Warren County struggles with. This is something everybody in the park struggles with. We have a beautiful landscape that we live in, but it's also a difficult landscape for the technology that we have all come to enjoy and love, hate, depending on what we're doing and when we're doing it. As far as the bullets, I don't have them in front of me, and unfortunately, I didn't memorize them. I should have. Those were all those bullets were formed out of many years of watching the APA take action on towers. They are constantly getting tower permit applications at this point. I haven't gone back in. I don't have the updated information about how many tower permits are pending, but last month there was over 30 of them. Part of that is the AT&T process for the where the government is creating that safety net. So if you have any questions about the specific bullets, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Chair. And I think maybe it's appropriate just for me to, can everyone see that, the bullet list that's on the resolution? Jerry, just for Jerry's stance. And Wayne and Jerry, please correct me if my Cliff Notes misses something important. But this is a recommendation to make some changes that can be made to the current APA substantially invisible policy. It's change one. The first bullet was change the policy to not readily discernible. The next bullet talks about co-location of carriers on one tower. I guess that's not necessarily happening easily today. Include general permits for cell carrier antennas on existing tall structures, such as water towers, hotel ski lifts, and so on. To allow cell carrier antennas of some height, such as 20 feet above existing structures within the APA hamlets, 10, 20 feet above the tree canopy. And I think in essence, that's it. But the whole idea is, at least in my mind, is to try to improve the digital expansion to the North Country and to the regions of Warren County that aren't serviced today. So I do realize also at the same time that this is somewhat controversial from some of the supervisors' standpoint. So what I'd like to do is open up discussion on this, allow it to go through the supervisors on the committee, and then expand it to others that aren't on the committee. So any questions for Wayne or Jerry or anyone else at the table? Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one question. If we pass this resolution today and it passes the board in mid-June, will any of these items bring broadband to people within the next 6 months?
I'm not qualified to answer that. Jerry, Wayne?
Yeah, I don't believe so, since this is really relative to cell towers, not so much broadband.
Will it bring will it bring cell service to anyone within the next 6 months?
Probably not, but it opens up the discussion, and it maybe instead of 3 years down the road, it happens in 2 years. I mean, because we all know this has been an ongoing problem for a number of years. And at some point, and I know there's a task force out there, but at some point we need to, move the needle a little bit. I think Supervisor Sieber sent an email, kind of said that when she was, this has been ongoing for a number of years. And maybe a way to look at it instead of quantity is quality. If we can get a little more height, get a longer throw on some of these, over some of the geography, maybe that's a simpler solution than building 30 more towers. I don't know. But I look right now and there's 15 cell towers north of the village, and most of them are along the Northway. There's one or two that's over in your town. But beyond that, when you look at the map, it's empty. And I think we need to start the process. Nothing is going to happen overnight, but we need to start the process. That's
Supervisor Bramer.
my 2 cents.
Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks so much, Chairman Wild. Yeah, I didn't want to take the floor from Supervisor Hogan if she had anything else.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Wayne, I completely agree with you. This has been an ongoing issue for a number of years, and we should be pushing this forward so that we can get cell phone coverage in greater places where we need it. And, you know, I was reading up on this, and Brian LaFleur had a comment in an article about how somebody was looking at a map, some cell phone provider person was looking at a map of the Adirondacks and said, well, that's all just trees and we don't need to provide coverage there. Well, obviously that's not true. We know that people live here and they need coverage for economic reasons and many other reasons as far as their being able to live within the blue line. Obviously they need cell phone coverage. We don't need coverage in the wilderness, in my mind. And it is something that has been brought to the forefront recently. The governor's task force did start meeting in the fall, and the governor also put it in his 2020 State of the State address that this was something that was really going to be drilled down on this year. So I'm looking, one of my questions is, has the task force come to any recommendations? Can we get a presentation from Bill Farber? Where are we with the gap study that was mentioned earlier on cell phone coverage? What is the problem? Is it only related to this policy issue items, or do we need to look at drilling down more on the actual infrastructure itself and where we are incentivizing people to put the cell phone towers? I know that Supervisor Diamond wanted to be involved in this discussion and he had to go, he has a school board meeting. So and there are a lot of questions that Supervisor Hogan put in her email that I think that we should address. And lastly, I think that a lot of these bullet points are a good idea. I do think that we should be taking this to legislative and rules and really figure out what are the policy issues that we want to advance as a county. And I don't think that we've spelled that out all yet. But I'm glad to have this discussion, and I do think it should be brought forward to legislative and rules where we usually do our advocacy work. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bramer. And unfortunately, I did not write down all those series of questions, and I may have missed some. But I see Jerry with his hand up. Jerry Delaney, would you like to comment? Supervisor Sieber, you're next.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to address Supervisor Hogan's question no, there's no guarantee that what you do here today will impact the cell towers, but this is an opportunity for your county to raise your voice and tell the governor's office, who will be working on this, on what the recommendations they're going to give him for this cell build out for the rural New York State, not just us. So, and I'd like to show you an example, or explain an example to you. In Hamilton County, they were building 2 towers on the same 100 by 100 acre, 100 by 100 foot lot. And they were both going to be the same exact height. And the agency has never taken private public comment to heart when setting the height of a tower. But in this particular case, 2 towers sitting side by side, another state agency requested that they raise one of them 10 feet above what was asked for. And they then raised one of those towers because they thought that the what we commonly refer to as Frankenpines didn't look realistic. They didn't look natural being the same height. And this is a case that was just kind of confounding to me, because every time you go up, you expand the area that you can actually reach to. And the board has these maps. They get the maps. They can tell where you can use a phone in a car, where you can use it only outside your car, well, how good the signal is. And these decisions are being based on a made-up term, which is substantially invisible. There is no definition for this term. And you are getting the cell phone carriers know where they have to create their top of their towers to stop so that they can move forward in a quick manner to get their towers up because it's business. So there's many examples of this where on separate applications that it's hard to imagine why you wouldn't want the ability for the board, the APA board, to have some input to say, what is good for the people? Where is the balance between what might be a little bit more visible and what would be a little less visible? And to Supervisor Bramer, I would say about the wilderness, I would agree with you. We don't need towers in the middle of the wilderness, but if there's places where we can reach in, if you read the ranger highlights, cell phone towers are not only saving lives, they are being a big asset to our forest rangers because they can go in and they can find people quickly before it becomes a disaster. So this is very much a health and safety issue for our visitors and our people that live here. So I'm sorry to ramble on about this, but this is really a big topic for the review board.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move on to Supervisor Sieber before I come back to the other supervisors who have already spoken.
Thanks, Supervisor Wild. Although I'm not giving up my place in line, I just want to be clear on this, but for just a couple seconds, I am sure our administrator wants a couple seconds to address this group.
No, I don't think that's appropriate. It's no news at all. No one wants to hear it. I'm sorry, I'm teasing. Go ahead, Ryan.
If anybody didn't see the comment, we did just get approved by the governor to begin phase 1 tomorrow, which means midnight tonight. Thank you to everybody, especially a lot of you who are on this meeting, for all your hard work in making that happen.
And your commitment to making that happen also, Ryan. Thank you. Supervisor Sieber, back to you.
Thank you. I just want to address a couple of concerns that I know I heard from several supervisors last night or the night before. I've lost track of the days, but I know that Supervisor Hogan brought up several questions as well as Supervisor Bramer. And, I get that the wheels turn very slow in government, but I took a significant amount of time to go back and see what I had missed over the last couple of years, but also to reflect upon what I learned in my first 2 terms of office. More recently, Supervisor Beatty and I were in DC and had an opportunity to hear actually very fierce advocacy for our region and for this very issue. I know Supervisor Beatty spoke at length about it while we were down in DC. But I also know that on this board, we've been very, very invested in the Adirondack Park being a county in that park, but also having the president of AATV be one of our own supervisors. I know you're all aware, but our public may not be, Supervisor Simpson. And I know we'll hear from him throughout this discussion today, but because wheels turn so slowly and one of our own supervisors in Queensbury is having problems just logging on either way, it's not just limited to the Adirondack Park, but it's certainly very, the dramatic impact of that lack of accessibility is within that Adirondack Park. So much like we just talked about with Revolution Rail and moving things forward so that we could have a discussion at the full board and not continue to wait and discuss. Perhaps it's something we could do today. Perhaps it's something we could look at these 6 points. We could get them onto the full board agenda and continue to have that discussion and debate. We should all be doing that research, but to hear our own staff, to listen to Wayne, to hear from Brian LaFleur, to read these articles, to know it's coming from our Assembly and our Senate representatives as well, and also our federal representatives. I think this is something, again, we need to send a strong message on. And while Supervisor Bramer alludes to the legislative committee, frankly, we don't have many legislative meetings. And so maybe we've brought other things outside of legislative through other committees to have these discussions to go to the full board. And I don't think that should be a reason why we aren't having them today. But given the COVID crisis, given what we have going on with our students, California just announced all their state schools will go online. I wonder what's going to happen with New York. And I can tell you that when we set these meetings in the middle of the day, everybody's getting kicked off. There's problems with the internet. And, you know, I think it's worth the discussion and the time in the middle of a crisis to be talking about something that affects every single one of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Sieber. Supervisor Leggett, did I see your hand up? No, no comment. Any other comments from? I did see your hands up. I'm not sure what it meant though.
That was just clapping on the news that we've hit phase 1.
Okay, all right.
I thought it was for me, Craig.
Supervisor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wishing that I was on that committee so that I could have participated early on. But this is a huge issue, and it's been brought even more in the forefront of all of our issues that we're dealing with COVID. The fact that connectivity everywhere is very important. I know it was brought up about broadband. All these iPads that everybody's using and tablets can all function. Actually, you either use Wi-Fi if you have Wi-Fi, and if you don't have Wi-Fi, then they come with a cellular number. That's how the data is transferred. So they are very critical to distance learning and just doing business in the Adirondacks. I have a taxi cab owner business in my community. Very difficult to communicate and offer his service throughout the Adirondacks. You know, we're learning how important our small businesses are and our entrepreneurs. Businesses and entrepreneurs that are very aware of the environmental impacts of technology and towers and sightliness. Well, those business owners, it's very important that they're the backbone of our economy in the North Country and in the Adirondacks. And to the families that are in these areas that have to come to town halls or public Wi-Fi places to be able to further their education or even deal with an epidemic and try to prevent their children from falling behind in education. This is how critical it is to be working on this now. And I don't think it should be put off for a future discussion. I think that we need to have many discussions if that's what it's going to take. But I think you do hear a consensus amongst everybody that there is a problem out there. And I don't think anybody's talking about providing cell for the interior of state lands. We're looking at vital infrastructure for all of our communities so that when unfortunate pandemics, things like this, when we have downturns in our economy, we have ways to communicate and build up our businesses. So all of these items have been vetted very thoroughly through local government groups. As Supervisor Sieber said, as president of the Adirondack Association of Towns, I'm president. That organization represents 101 towns and villages throughout the Adirondack Park. So this is our #1 legislative item, broadband and cellular. And they're connected, they're tied together. One can work where the other one doesn't and vice versa. So, you know, these are all possibilities, things that can happen within the APA, Adirondack Park Agency Act, that can facilitate for-profit companies actually expanding infrastructure, looking at projects in our communities. A lot of these projects, and I believe Jerry, if he's still on the phone, could probably speak to it. Yeah, I see him. He, you know, a lot of times these applicants, they come with a project to the APA, they deal with the staff, and they may be proposing, I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical number and I'll do it low, proposing 50 feet. If the staff decides that it's 30 feet, then that application doesn't even get before the commissioners, I believe, until it meets their standard. And I think that, you know, there needs to be, you know, transparency in this whole process where, you know, these applicants could show how a higher tower could benefit, and especially benefit the residents, and everybody can look at all the facts on these, not just one aspect and not see the other. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Simpson. Wayne, I see your hand, but I'm going to move over to Supervisor Garrity for a moment.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that since 1996, when we first went up to Lake Placid to APA Local Government Day, we were told next year everybody would have broadband. And next year everybody will have broadband. We've been back there every year and we hear the same thing. So I don't understand why you want to delay this or not keep talking about it. I wrote a letter to the governor's office praising him about the rest area and asking him what was going on with broadband, because I'm not sure the governor really understands what's going on with broadband. I sat in the EDC office with some people 3 or 4 years ago when they came out with all these big announcements and, oh yes, you're going to get broadband, but we don't get broadband. We don't get the coverage up here. We had students during this latest remote learning couldn't learn. They had to do other things in Warrensburg. I checked with the superintendent. So I think it is critical that this does get addressed. And maybe we as a county board need to go to the APA. If you remember right, when I was chairman, it took us 2 years to get the tower suited in Warrensburg to approve the emergency communications for our community, just so we could talk back to fire and EMS. And if we're going to Chestertown, we still lose being able to talk on your phones or on the radio sometime, even now. And so since 1996, or since 2016, excuse me, every year we've been told, you're going to have broadband, you're going to have broadband. We don't have broadband. I'm not saying everything is the APA's fault, but they could do a lot better job. And like I said, 2 years, folks, 2 years to get a tower in Warrensburg on town-owned property. We put up for emergency communications. The other thing you're missing is FirstNet. FirstNet was hired after 9/11 in New York City to give countrywide communications. We've had FirstNet come into some of our meetings, APA local government and AATV meetings, and they're not even getting coverage in the Adirondack Park because they shy away from us. And that has to be point-to-point coverage. So sometimes those towers need to be taller than 60 feet or whatever height distance, because I just feel, let's not kick the can down the road any longer. Let's step up and do something right for once and just show people that the maps aren't right and we don't have coverage. Any way you want to say it, if you want to be politically correct about it, be politically correct. But I'm telling you right now, I've written the governor personally and never gotten a response. And I'm tired of going to these seminars or going to Crandall Library and having Senator Gillibrand get up and say, oh, we're putting all this money into broadband. Great. Where is it? We're not seeing it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Kevin. I want to go back to Wayne. Supervisor Bramer, I do see your hand. And Supervisor Simpson also. But Wayne, I believe you had your hand up to make some comment.
Well, actually, I didn't, but now that I'll take the opportunity. One of the things that I was just pushing my hair back. It's gotten so long, I haven't been able to get my hair cut.
We are trying to get off of this so we can get Administrator Moore back to work. Okay, so
yeah,
let's make this happen.
I hear you. I think one of the key things to point out for those that were in the area or involved in government at that point in time, after 9/11, there was a big influx of people from the metro areas to the North Country. We saw that, and I'm not going to predict, but I would suspect that we're going to see that again, that the people that can are going to leave some of the denser metropolitan areas as a result of the virus issues and how they were potentially affected. I think we need to be digitally competitive with other areas. And I think the existing businesses are really being put under stress as far as the bandwidth that's available, because as Matt said and others have said, all the schools being done on, iPads or laptops, and that all takes bandwidth. And so at some point, we need to address it, whether it's today or 2 years from now, the issue is still going to be the same. And given the gestation period that we experience in government, we need to get the ball rolling.
All right. So if everyone will just entertain me for a moment, I have a question. I wonder about the consequences of doing this, of having a resolution versus the consequences of not doing the resolution. So I'm curious, can anyone speak to that? And I have to be very honest with you. I also have quite a few things to do. I'd like to be very succinct, please, with your comments. So I directly related to this question about the consequences, Supervisor Simpson.
I think it's very important to move. Representing the town of Horicon, I've got a section of town, and this is where I think it gets lost. I've got a section of my town that has a certain provider, which I won't name the provider. They don't have landline. The response from the company is it's going to be 6 weeks. I call the Public Service Commission. There's nothing they can do. I call another provider about broadband. It's going to be 2 years because they need to complete the Charter Spectrum merger before they can do it. I've got $211,000 in an account with Spectrum to build out broadband, don't have anybody to build it out on their line. So they don't have a landline, they don't have internet, they have no communications whatsoever, no cell coverage. I bring a company in that can solve that problem by using telephone poles.
Supervisor Simpson, if I can, I asked about consequences, and I need to.
Consequences are public safety.
What are the political consequences of doing this versus not doing it? That's what I need to focus on. I know everybody has specific passions about this, but
Chairman
before we move forward, I want to talk about the consequences.
Can I say something?
I see you, Supervisor Bramer. I'm looking for new comments first. Supervisor
Public
Thomas.
safety.
Supervisor Thomas, I got to be unmuted, Frank.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of consequences. I have two individuals in Stony Creek right now. One's from New Jersey. One is a lady that lived in Stony Creek prior and moved to Pennsylvania and has returned, and she's an architect. And neither one of them can get service enough to move their businesses to Stony Creek, and one is returned. She has a hard time doing her architectural operation because she needs the internet to communicate with her clients. And the same with the second individual from New Jersey. Would love to move up here. Let's build a great big house, beautiful house. Can't move up here because he can't do his, he can't do his work. So there's two consequences right there. Not only for for internet, but for the county. And I got multiple people that can't get cell service. And I really don't understand what the problem is. You can go next door to Vermont. They have just as many mountains as we have, and they put cell towers on top of their mountains. And I don't know, I don't think anybody's had a heart attack or anything. There's got to be some compromise here, and it's long overdue. This has been going on for 20 years. So, this is just a start as far as I'm concerned.
Supervisor Hogan, you had your hand up before Supervisor Bramer did, and welcome back.
Thank you. And I only have another minute to devote to this, but this impassioned speech and call for public safety is exactly what I was concerned about. This is a really complex issue. I don't disagree with the advocates for the cell tower regulation changes, but I do not feel that this committee is hearing all sides of this argument and that this committee is going to be making a well-informed decision. I do not feel the middle of a pandemic is the time to be contemplating something this complex. If we want to talk about concrete actions that will get people better service within the next 6 months, I'm all in. But right now, I got other things to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Bramer, briefly, if you can, please.
I absolutely agree that this is something that we need to address. this resolution is not going to bring us cell phone coverage or internet access. But as Supervisor Garrity said, I would like to be politically correct. And I think that passing this resolution has the potential to alienate APA, the people on that task force who are already working very hard. And importantly, yes, it has the potential to alienate the governor, who we need for assistance for bringing money to the Adirondacks. And as you guys know, Johnsburg in particular has gotten a lot of money to help with broadband and cell phone coverage. And passing this this resolution does not help us get any farther, because as was already said, there are many, many cell phone tower applications already in the pipeline. There's nothing showing that this specific language that you're putting here is a detriment. And I resent the comment that the term substantially invisible has no definition. There is a 5-page policy from APA explaining exactly what is meant, what APA is supposed to weigh and balance, and it is there to help them guide their decision. What I see in front of me is some bullet points that have not been flushed out, and there is no definition to not readily discernible. So I am not going to support going from what some people call as an arbitrary definition or term to a different arbitrary term that hasn't been defined at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Bramer. Supervisor Simpson, how about 30 seconds? Can you do it in 30 seconds?
I was just going to answer your question from when you asked me why we would do this, and it's public safety, it's communications. And there's no action that's going to do anything in 6 months from our action today. But we have to start somewhere. This is asking for a review of the tower regs. This isn't a demanding, we don't have power over the APA. The governor does. The state does. We don't. But we have to start somewhere. And we
then
all
why don't we
agree.
ask for, I'm
No.
sorry, why
Yes, I
don't we
don't have
ask
the
for
floor.
a review?
I'm sorry,
I
point
think
of
I had
order.
the floor. So I think that, it says right here, request APA review and modify cell tower regs. Once it's out of our hands, we don't know where it goes. It can all get shot down. It can get rewritten, but we need to express our points, what we think can happen. And this was done, this work is backed up by, has had legal opinions done on it, so.
Mr. Simpson, thank you. Mr. Supervisor Leggett, I think this will be the last one.
Thank you. I'm going to be real cynical here. It's not going to make any difference if we send this resolution or not. When you look at the whole history that this has been discussed and gone on for a long time, I don't think it's going to offend anybody either, task force or not. These are positions that are well known. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you. So I am not going to weigh in on this. I'm going to bring it to the board, and I'd like to get the opinion of the board, yay or nay, in terms of whether or not we'd like to bring a resolution to the full board. So we have the outline of one right here. I'm curious, are the members of the committee, what is your passion on this? And I'm going to just do a kind of brief kind of roll call. Supervisor Hogan, yay or nay?
No.
Supervisor Leggett. As of today, no, I would support one that was written more clearly.
Supervisor Bramer. Claudia, an opinion on this? I'm assuming it's no, right?
I would support advocacy saying we would like the task force to speed along its process. I am not prepared to vote yes on this particular with the bullet items at the bottom. No.
I'll take that as a no. Supervisor Diamond's not here. Supervisor Dickinson, Supervisor McDowell, Supervisor McDivitt.
Right. Supervisor McGowan's on my phone if you'd like to hear his vote.
I'm back.
Hello, Bradley. What do you think? What do you feel?
We had there's a snafu. I guess we're down, so I have nothing. So,
It's a yay or nay.
Yay.
Supervisor McDevitt,
Yes.
Supervisor Sieber,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. We have a draw here. We have 4 no, 4 yes. I think what that means is we should consider this, do some research, bring it up next time. But Mr. Leggett,
Yeah, well, it just needs, the language needs to be reworked. That's all. I think
you have a suggestion?
not this time of day. No.
Point of order.
Thank
I'm
you,
out.
Craig.
Bye.
Bye.
There's a
Supervisor
point of order.
Supervisor Sieber?
Thank you. I believe point of order should have been addressed before people got off, but I thought at this point our chairman of the board could weigh in and make a vote. Is that not applicable per Robert's rules?
I'm not sure about committee.
I see Conover shaking his head no, but I know we've had some debate on this. That I don't know, maybe Ryan knows.
Will your absences count as a no on a committee level? I don't know if they do. Mary, are you on the call?
I meant for the chairman to, on a tie.
I am here. I would have to review our rules, which if you can give me a couple minutes, I can do that.
I think that's appropriate to let Mary look into it.
That's the pleasure of the committee. I know we're taking a lot of everyone's time. Next time, we're going to be up in the beginning of the agenda instead of last one.
I'm also not sure it matters at this point since you lost some of your votes.
We lost some of the voters. We don't have a, are you saying that we don't have a quorum any longer?
I'm not sure. Is Amanda there?
Amanda?
I'm just checking.
Thank you.
Definitely count Brad as here because he's still on my phone.
I'm not sure that you do.
Then it's a moot point.
Again, another point of order. I mean, we go by Robert's rules for a reason. We're not sure that we have a quorum. I don't mean this controversial, Amanda. I'm just trying to.
We had a quorum when we took the vote.
Right. So my question is specifically.
When you took the vote and the vote was tied. By our typical rules, the chairman only fills in for the committee if there's not a quorum present. If there's something else in Robert's Rules of Order, Mary would need to speak to that. But the way we typically act is the chairman only votes as if he's needed to make quorum. If he's not needed to make quorum, that would be considered a draw, and the motion would be, it wouldn't go anywhere. Good.
Does Mary, that, is there anything about tie breaking on a tie in a committee for the chairman?
In Robert's Rules?
Well, Robert's rules or our board, this has come up a couple of times in committees before. I just think, and maybe Supervisor Leggett, is he still here? Did he leave as well?
He left as well. I guess I'm just saying I don't think it's appropriate to now decide on something when you don't have your quorum. I realize when you voted that you had a quorum, but now people have left and they're not part of this discussion. I don't think it's appropriate to continue it.
With all due respect, and Mary, I appreciate that, and this comment is not towards you. It's just simply that we're all still taking time to be on this call, and despite whether running a town or not, we all have obligations. So we're all here. I'm sorry that the other people got off of it, but I don't know if it's something that can be referred to another committee. I just think that there's also the element that everyone was in fact on this call. But I know Chairman Thomas just had his hand up, and I don't mean to step in front of him, and I apologize.
Chairman Thomas.
Another meeting.
We could always schedule another meeting and offer another committee to pick it up. But my sense is that we no longer have a quorum, and I'm not even sure we can adjourn this meeting without a quorum, can we? Well, maybe with the chairman to come in.
Well, if that's legal and possible, I'm ready to do that. But this seems to happen all the time with economic development. Is we end up on the end of the line here, and things have overrun every time we have meetings. So, maybe this needs to be on a different day at a different time because we end up in this situation a lot.
I'm agreeing, Mr. Chairman. I think this is an important discussion and it's tough to be at the end of the day. So I I guess what I'll do is I'll plan on concluding this meeting because we no longer have a quorum. And I will poll the committee and the other board members to get a sense of whether this is something that's deserving of a special meeting to make this happen. I think it's important. I think everybody needs to weigh in. But right now, I think, and Rachel, I see your hand, but I don't think the discussion is valid any longer without a quorum, but I'll give you a shot.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just don't think that being chairman of a committee allows you the opportunity to just cease all discussions, even when there isn't a quorum to officially end it. We've had a lot of emails and a lot of discussions going back and forth about political accusations over this type of a topic. And for enough members to get off this call, I would say that that is, in fact, some type of a political action, making a statement to this committee. And I think we have other people on this call that are representatives of different agencies and our department heads. And out of sheer respect, I understand other people have many commitments, but Mike, for you to say you don't know if there's enough of a commitment or support to have another meeting, I think just looking at this dialogue and the time that's already been spent on it tells you that answer. So I would suggest let's schedule another meeting for 2 days from now or 3 days from now, but let's get this moving so that we can have more discussion over this type of a topic, which is clearly an issue to many of our members. And that's what we do here, right? It's the majority.
Thank you, Supervisor Sieber. Supervisor Conover.
Yeah, I just want you to know that I'm prepared to support the resolution at whatever point in time. And those that can't support it, I respect their right to not support it. And it's as simple as that. It's like any matter that comes before us, right? And if even after it's adopted, if they wish to continue to work on this and bring people in and talk about this, that they have every right to do that as well. So, but like Frank, I've been dealing with this in my community now for going on 11 years, Frank longer than that. And, you know, a number of us understand this issue well. But on the question of improved infrastructure and towers and expediting the review process, I will be an absolute yes.
If it's the pleasure of the committee, if I could ask Amanda Allen, is there a chance you could schedule another meeting? I know we don't have many that are still on the committee on this call, but I'm not sure how we go about scheduling that. Anyone have a suggestion? Wayne, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I would suggest that if the procedures don't allow for another meeting or without notice and you know adequate time for notice, that this at least get carried as a pending item for the next meeting. That's all.
Thank you for the suggestion, but I'm going to try to have another meeting.
We just need 72 hours notice.
Could we do it next week? Is there some other something going on next week in terms of committee meetings that we might be able to tag onto?
On May 28th, which is next Thursday, we have personnel and finance.
Would it be agreeable to try to schedule it before or after?
You could schedule it before, but you would only have an hour, so that might not be advisable. That's up to you. You could do it at 9 and do it from 9 to 10, or we could schedule it to follow finance. Right now, both of those agendas for personnel and finance look relatively short.
So I'm looking for suggestions from everyone that's still on the phone. Can we get this done in an hour? Do we think we can do that? Rachel, yes? Do it after?
Wild, I would say, you know, I'd schedule that from 9 to 10, let everybody know once again, well ahead of time, be prepared with questions, calls, concerns. And then if you need a third meeting, you need a third meeting, but ask people to be able to block off 1 hour while we're all on this committee. But our meetings, they always go long. There's nothing short about this board, especially on Zoom.
Supervisor or Administrator Moore, do you know what's on the agenda for personnel and finance? Ryan, do we have quite a bit on the agenda for those? You have a feeling about if they're going to last long or not?
Let me get my book here. When did we start? Yesterday? Personnel, no, there's nothing on there. Just going through, there's nothing on there that's going to generate a significant amount of time.
Okay, so I guess my suggestion would be to do it immediately following personnel and finance, if that's okay.
Okay, we'll schedule it and send the meeting notice out today.
Thank you very much. Has this meeting been adjourned because we don't have a quorum any longer? I'm not,
Or do you carry it till next week?
we just carry this forward?
No, Mr. Wild, you can just declare the meeting adjourned.
I can just declare it adjourned? Then
Yes,
and without objection, I will do so. Thank you everyone for participating, and sorry we couldn't get through this in a reasonable time frame. And we will try again. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.